Well, um, in our previous claim of fact speech, Serena Gonzalez made a claim that humans have a negative impact on coral reefs. Due to her claims that humans were overfishing due to chemical and sewage leakage and the distribution of trash into the ocean, coral reefs have been experiencing decline in the past decade. This claim can be refuted through Serena's lack of statistical data, missing examples, and weak evidence. I will prove that humans do not have a negative impact on coral reefs. In Serena's speech, she begins by describing how overfishing led to a decline of the shark population. In this first supporting claim, Serena utilizes sharks as the main example, stating that, due to this, over 100 million or more sharks are lost per year. And since they are a keystone species, it leads to the deterioration of the coral reef due to the imbalance of the food chain. However, without proper statistical data about sharks, this number is not put into the right perspective. From Wonderopolis.org, scientists agree that there happen to be so many different types of sharks that it would be impossible to count them all. The 100 million sharks lost per year is nothing compared to the estimated number of billions of sharks in the world from various sources. In addition, in her example of the Mediterranean ecosystem, she fails to include that there are other keystone species, which according to coralreefinfo.com, include animals such as barracudas, large sea basses, and trumpetfishes. This means that even though sharks may be experiencing decline, it has little to no effect on the actual ecosystem of the Mediterranean because there are multiple keystone species that maintain the balance. Therefore, the minuscule decline of the shark population due to overfishing results in very little to no effect to coral reefs. Continuing on to Serena's second claim, that the chemicals in sewage produced by humans have a negative impact on coral reefs. She fails to provide examples of how sewage and chemical leaks have made an impact. A major flaw in her claim is the fact that all first world countries have sewage systems that treat the polluted water. According to waterencyclopedia.com, sewage is treated before being discharged, either underground in the case of septic tanks or to receiving surface water bodies in the case of sewage treatment plants, typically a stream, river, or coastal outlet. This means that sewage systems must go through a filtration system, therefore removing the majority of physical and chemical pollution even before hypothetically reaching the ocean. In addition, many resources such as Springer.com only talk about how 10% of coral reefs could be at risk of exposure and not actually having any effect. One of her main examples was how 14,000 gallons of sunscreen is washed into the ocean by beach tourists. But compared to the millions of gallons of water in the ocean, her evidence cannot fully claim that it has an effect on coral reefs. As stated in her evidence, these coral reefs only have a 10% chance of being at risk, meaning most likely there is no risk at all. Lastly, Serena made a final claim that trash from humans have a negative impact on coral reefs. Serena uses fishing gear as one of the main examples. In Serena's evidence from ScienceDirect.com, she states that fishing gear made up for 87% of debris, specifically in Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. Serena fails to include that later in the article, they specifically state that besides that coral reef in Florida, less than 0.2% of coral reefs in the habitat studied were affected by fishing gear in terms of abrasions and partial mortality. This study included habitats that were located in 63 locations within a span of a 200-kilometer range southwest and northwest of Florida. In actuality, fishing gear is barely even affecting coral, and it's only prominent in offshore. In conclusion, the lack of proper evidence, specific examples, and missing statistical data, we can see that humans do not have a negative impact on coral reefs. Thank you.
All right, structurally everything's sound. I like the evidence that you have on each of the individual points that suggest that there are key elements of the advocate's argument that are missing context. The number of sharks that get killed each year, you kind of diminish that by talking about the number of sharks that are likely to be in the environment. You suggest that there are billions, 100 million is a small number in comparison. Okay, I think that that's a reasonable challenge. I'm not sure that the advocate gave us any threshold on which the harm is supposed to occur. You did a good job suggesting that there are other keystone species in the Mediterranean area, for instance, that would probably be equally important, and there doesn't seem to be any information suggesting that they are being wiped out or threatened in any way. So I guess that this is a way to suggest that the argument is being overstated here and it's unlikely to have any impact. Your explanation on that point was fine. On the second point concerning the pollution, the chemicals and the sewage material, you've got an interesting argument about first world countries filtering the water that goes into the oceans, treatment centers, that kind of thing. I think that that's a good argument. Of course, it doesn't address those countries that don't do that sort of thing, so there may be a substantial amount there. You, however, have a creative piece of information that the advocate used that said only 10% of the coral reefs could potentially be at risk as a result of this. So it sounds like it's a relatively small portion, and then the question becomes, if that 10% went, would the rest of it go? I think that I think there's a press to be made here that there's an argument that the advocate needs to be able to suggest some further link there. The sunscreen argument, you again put it into context. I think that there's a pretty reasonable press on this one. I think you could probably find some information that also worked on it, but the press that you're making is okay. And then on the trash argument, I like the fact that you found evidence from the advocate's own source that suggests that the fishing gear, which was apparently a major impact on one coral reef, is not an impact on the vast majority of coral reefs, and you've got a nice statistic from the advocate's source that suggests that it is really minuscule in total of the risk factors there. So I think that that's a good way to go about kind of diminishing those arguments. And it was clearly cited. Thank you. You can applaud me. That's okay. It doesn't hurt me. I just think that second round